Mr. Rogers, the Reverend Mr. Rogers, said, "The values we care about the deepest and the movements within society that support those values command our love. When those things that we care about so deeply become endangered, we become enraged. And what a healthy thing that is. Without it, we would never rise up and speak out for what we believe." That was from a wonderful selection called The World According to Mr. Rogers. You and I come from a long line of Unitarian Universalists who got angry, who in their heated concerns worked for justice. The Reverend Meg Barnhouse, a colleague, pointed out that this is our deep calling derived from faith, and it's all about that sixth principle. She said, "What I hear so often from many of you is such a feeling of being overwhelmed. Quotations abound about never giving up, and the only people who accomplish great things are those who keep working, especially when there feels like there's no hope, and that giving up is not an option. There is too much to be done, yet there is too much to be done," said Barnhouse. "Our sixth principle is overwhelming. It says that as we, as UUs, agree to affirm, say yes to, and promote, try to get others to say yes to, the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all." That is really big. Makes a person think the framers of the principles were getting tired at the end there at that sixth principle and just decided, we want the whole world to be okay. Everything else plus that big freezer out in the garage, we're just going to throw it in there. What do you do with a principle that big and unwieldy? First, we have to acknowledge that we are not and never have been alone in our attempts to work for positive change. Ralph Waldo Emerson said a successful life was to leave the world, quote, "a little bit better," whether by a healthy child or a garden patch or a redeemed social condition. To know that even one life has breathed easier because you have lived. I love how Emerson speaks so hopefully of a redeemed social condition. Just one? There are so many. So even though you and I know the work for social justice is vast, may we also know that we are part of a lineage of justice makers who have put their heart and soul in the quest for more justice. Over the centuries, Unitarian Universalists have thrown their life energies into the forces of change. Maybe you know some of these names, maybe you don't. Horace Mann organized the public school system so that all may have access to equal education. That was Unitarian Horace Mann. Universalist Clara Barton founded the American Red Cross. Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes was led by his liberal faith to a much more inclusive interpretation of law. Thomas Starr King, the name of one of our UU seminaries in Berkeley, California, he was inspired to fight the California legislature for continued land rights for Mexicans. Jane Hull founded Hull House in Chicago and began to professionalize social workers, moving care for the poor from religious institutions that required you believe a certain way before you received care to non-religiously affiliated professionals. Roger Baldwin established the American Civil Liberties Union, the ACLU. May Sarton wrote poetry, inspiring her readers with truth and beauty. Susan B. Anthony worked her whole adult life to acquire the opportunity to vote for women. There was Frances Ellen Watkins Harper, whom publishers began to print her work. And in 1854, she gave a public lecture on, quote, the education and the elevation of colored race. She gave several more lectures, and soon she had a full-time job as a traveling lecturer for the State Anti-Slavery Society of Maine. This is huge. She drew large audiences, and judging from newspaper accounts and reviews, she did not disappoint them. Some of her words are in our gray hymnal. New Englanders had long disapproved, this is what's amazing about it, long disapproved of women who spoke in public. But opinions were beginning to change, and Frances Watkins was a novelty. Audiences, whether black or white, male or female, wanted to hear this eloquent woman of color who outshone nearly all other orators on the circuit. They were charmed by her musical voice, her well-reasoned arguments, and her poetic language. She published a book of poems in 1854, and thousands of people who attended her lectures bought her book after hearing her speak, and she donated most of the money she earned from her books to the anti-slavery cause. Norma Elizabeth Boyd was one of the founders of the Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority and founded the Nonpartisan Council on Organization. It's an organization affiliated with the Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority that successfully lobbied for the admission of African American women in the Women's Auxiliary Corps during World War II. And she lobbied for other causes. Because her work was in lobbying behind the scenes, we haven't heard about her much. She is often not credited for the things she did, such as how outspoken she was about anti-lynching legislation in the 1940s. Boyd was a longtime member of All Souls, Washington, D.C. There was Whitney Young, a Unitarian, through his leadership with the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, NAACP, National Association of Social Workers. He was a social worker, but he also went on to gain more courses and accreditations through Harvard. And then there was the National Urban League. He became a critical component of the civil rights movement along with Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. You know how hard it is to tell people what a Unitarian Universalist is? I want you to know all of these names I listed will be of help to you. If you want to pick up a print copy, or if you want a print copy of this, I would be happy to share it, but all you have to say is, Superman was a Unitarian Universalist. And so was Horace Mann, and so was Clara Barton, and Susan B. Anthony. Sometimes that's helpful. When we speak of justice makers, especially those who worked with King, we also have to say the name of Reverend James Reeb, an American Unitarian Universalist minister within our movement who died March 11th, 1965 in Selma, when he was attacked by white supremacists. Rarely mentioned is Viola Favre-Liuzzo, who also was an American civil rights activist. In March 1965, Liuzzo heeded the call from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and traveled from Detroit, Michigan to Selma in the wake of the Bloody Sunday attempt at marching across the Edmund Pettus Bridge. So she came and worked hard with the movement. She participated in the successful Selma to Montgomery marches and helped with coordination and logistics. At the age of only 39, while driving back from a trip shuttling fellow activists to the Montgomery airport, she was fatally hit by shots fired from a car that was pursuing her with Ku Klux Klansmen in the car. She, too, was a Unitarian Universalist. Our two denominations came together in 61. By 65, we were the Unitarian Universalists. So these are the names of just some of the justice makers in our UU history. Some perished in the work of promoting justice. Others who go unnamed quietly pursued justice in less public ways. However, in all scenarios I mentioned earlier, these individuals had to find a way to have a center, to keep reminding themselves of why they were fighting, why they were speaking up, why they were marching. They had to go within themselves and maybe outside themselves to find that center, the strong strength to continue. Perhaps their centering practice was prayer. Maybe it was paying attention to the internal voice that said, "This isn't right. I can and will do something to change the injustice." Howard Thurman said, "In the stillness of the quiet, if we listen, we can hear the whisper of the heart giving strength to weakness, courage to fear, and hope to despair." Here's the thing I've been thinking about lately. How do we remain focused on creating change when you and I may never see the results of our work? How does that feel? Reverend Susan Frederick Gray reminded us, current president of the Unitarian Universalist Association, she said, "This is no time for a casual faith." I totally agree, and yet every one of us in this room realizes the overwhelming list of occasions of injustice before us. I, too, want to show up for potlucks and celebrate our island of safety, and this campus is a safe, lovely place. And yet, we know there is much in our community that needs our attention, much in our state, in our nation, in the world. Sophocles said, "If we are to keep our democracy, there must be one commandment: thou shalt not ration justice." The theme, of course, of justice permeates our 7, now in this congregation, our 8 principles. It's what motivates much of our deeds, rather than our creedal action. That is, our commitment to a faith based on deeds rather than creeds. And yet, this aspect of our faith is one of the most exhaustive elements as we endeavor to make our way through life as a Unitarian Universalist. Perhaps our calling is to view our work together as making an investment in the future. Maybe everything I do with you is about investing in the future. This requires making time to center yourself, to take care of yourself, to rest when you need to, and to provide for others when you can, all the while persistently, one eye on the present moment and one eye on what the future might look like. That's the fulfillment of the dream for a beloved community that you and I may never see. Harriet Tubman said, "Every great dream begins with a dreamer." Certainly, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s dream, and all who worked for change during the civil rights era, remember, he did not create the change alone. We must keep that dream front and center, today as well as tomorrow to come. And whether you visit here via Zoom or in person, may you find sanctuary here. May you find a little comfort. May you find a boost from the weekly doses of bruises that you get as we constantly bump up against society's sometimes uncivilized or sharp corners. You will come here seeking respite, which hopefully will be provided. But then I have to tell you, I will be the one saying, "Get back out there and make a difference." Yeah, get back out there. In a way, I feel like my job is to put a little ice on the proverbial bruise and pat it and say, there. And then I'm going to push you out the door again. And you're going to go back out into society as rough as it is and make a difference. And each time you come back, I promise you this, you are not alone. Others are here with you. We have a lineage, and I'm here with you in this work, in this our attempt to make a positive change. Blessed be this our UU home of care and courage. At this time, I invite you for the final hymn, number 169 in the gray hymnal, if you prefer the hymnal or the slide. Now, the choir will sing the first two verses, and then I invite you all to join on the third and the fourth verse.
We shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday. We walk hand in hand. We'll walk hand in hand. We'll walk hand in hand someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday. We shall all be free. We shall all be free. We shall all be free someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall all make free someday. We shall live in peace. We shall live in peace. We shall live in peace someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall live peace someday.
Thank you for remaining standing. You all in this congregation had a ritual years ago where you gathered each other's hands. And so today, even though we're not touching each other's hands, many of us put out our hands like this. For others, perhaps you are open to the universe and your hands go like this. It's up to you. We are inclusive. Would Mike extinguish the chalice for me as I invite others to read the extinguishing words? Go in peace, go making peace, live gently, love mightily, and bow to the mystery. Thank you. Please stay or exit as you wish while our pianist Cheryl Brown plays us out.